Hello. Let us continue our symposium. Let me introduce Denis Stolyarov, who will be moderating this panel.
Thank you. So we can continue. Thank you for staying with us. And we have a brilliant panel now. I'm going to introduce 4 speakers, and then we'll try to reduce the basically get back on track and finish on time. So we have 4 people. My name is Denis Stolyarov, and I'm really grateful to Katy and Elena for organizing this symposium and for inviting me for this minor but very honorable role. I'm really proud to play it. And we have 4 people. I'm going to talk briefly about all of them. So the first one is Sarah Wilson, Professor Sarah Wilson, a professor of art history at the Courtauld Institute of Art. Sarah is a prominent author of several books on 20th century French art, as well as a curator of a number of major exhibitions at such institutions as the Royal Academy of Art, Barbican, and the Whitechapel Gallery, among others. She has also overseen several research projects on Russian art, and I myself am proud to be Sarah's former student. After that, we'll have a presentation from Fyodor Pavlov-Andreevich, who will join us online. And in his own words, he is a Moscow-born Brazilian performance artist who explores the distance between a work of art and its audience, creating performances, films, and site-specific installations, as well as sculptures, guerrilla actions, and long-durational works. Before becoming an artist, Fyodor worked with Joseph, administrating the first 2 editions of the Biennale. Then next to me, Marat Guelman is a gallerist, collector, publicist, and curator. Marat is running a Berlin-based gallery, Guelman und Unbekannt, focusing on the collaboration between artists and artificial intelligence. But before that, he was a founder of one of the first galleries in Russia, and then a founder and the director of the Perm Museum of Contemporary Art. Marat donated his collection to the Tretyakov Art Gallery, and he left Russia in 2014 under the political pressure, and last year he has been added to the list of extremists. Finally, Valentin Diaconov, he is a critic and curator, and he is the curator of modern and contemporary art at the Whitworth Museum at the University of Manchester. Before that, Valentin was a researcher at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston and the curator at the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art. And before that, Valentin was a leading art critic of Kommersant newspaper, the main daily newspaper in Russia at that time. Thank you, and join me. Oh yes, and the protocol, so we have 10 minutes for each paper. Sarah.
I'm going to be very brief because I've been very, very moved by the I was going to say témoignage, the witness statements of these people who work closely with Joseph. I wish I had worked closely with him, but my problem has always been that I'm intergenerational. So I was at the Pompidou Center. I just caught the very, very tail end of Paris-Moscou. And thanks to those connections that had been set up by those great curators like Jean Hubert, who's just spoken to us, and other people like Serge Fauchereau, I was able to go with a visit of the personnel of the Pompidou, the kind of hostesses and so forth, to Moscow for the first time in 1981, which was very surprising and amazing. And we did go to the circus. It was just post the Olympics, actually. We were in an Olympic hotel. In '89, I went with Henry Merrick Hughes to the amazing AICA MoMA, International Association of Art Critics, conference that was in Moscow and Tbilisi, where I think they took us because they wanted us to be able to eat lots of raw cucumbers, which weren't available in Moscow, but we had an extraordinary time there. And then in '92 I went partly to do with my thesis, which was to do with Franco-Russian relationships, to do with the revolutionary and resistant communist avant-garde in France, which had very strong links with Moscow and the Comintern and so forth. Still, I'm afraid, not speaking Russian, which I've never managed to master, despite having wonderful lessons here by Victoria from Crimea. And then it was in 2005 that, again, thanks to the French government, very bizarrely, this is all before I meet Joseph, in 2005, and missing his first Moscow Biennale, which was legendarily in the Lenin Museum, but I never saw it. I went with Catherine David, the future curator of Documenta 10, and Catherine Perrin, a philosopher, thanks to the French government, to Moscow, and was taken around to meet lots of important contemporary artists. It was an extraordinary experience, thanks to which, after 2006, I tried to take my MAs consistently to Moscow. So I had fantastic adventures. And so, of course, I went to all sorts of things that I carefully timed, but I wasn't involved in the behind-the-scenes thing. So I went, for example, to the opening at the Garage, but I didn't know of Joseph's particular role. I knew it coincided absolutely on the day of the Great Sotheby's sale. And one of my rich students was, I saw the day before, just outside Sotheby's, and the next day in the garden. But that was my kind of relationship, although, as you say, Joseph was ubiquitous and mysterious. And so after that, I went with two of my colleagues, Julian Stalabras and Clara Kemp-Welch, who was here, up the legendary skyscraper in the snow to that Biennale. But I never, of course, knew all the argy-bargies that went on behind the scenes, apart from the fact that very, very scared getting into that outside lift, which we just hoped would take us safely to the ground. And then I went to Jean Hubert's wonderful Biennale, which I didn't really know, but I should have suspected, of course, that Joseph was behind the scenes. And I suppose I'm overwhelmingly have a desire to tell you this, to make you laugh, but it's not to do with Joseph. But I was so thrilled to be invited, because I was never the sort of person who would be on your A-list. I bought some fantastic diamond shoes from Whitechapel, as I live in the East End, some sort of fake diamante stilettos, so I could sort of swagger around with Dasha, and I put on all my glad rags, and then I discovered I hadn't been invited to the right opening. But I still went to the beautiful Jean Hubert Moscow Biennale with my wonderful friend Dmitry Gutov's super net constructivist thing you've seen, in these rather embarrassing diamond shoes. But so I've just simply tried in this intergenerational way to do my best in terms of supervision. In the past, no scholar could hold their own in any way without speaking the language and being able to read the literature, of course. But subsequent to Julian Stalabras prancing around in Havana, I decided not only was it imperative to witness this great Russian adventure, but that my role, as I always say to everyone to justify myself, would be like the conductor in the orchestra who cannot possibly be the first violin or the percussionist or whatever. I also took my students to Vinzavod and met Marat a long time ago, and I remember a performance maybe even before Vinzavod in a big courtyard with a fake marriage and a plastic rose, which is on top of my fridge always, Marat. And so I've had this extraordinary adventure of these years, and feeling deeply the pain and the tragedy of having gone to the opening of the VAC Foundation, Victoria Mickelson, also being a Courtauld student, after whom that was named in December 2021. So the two memories I'd like to share very briefly, which are Joseph memories. One is in a taxi and one is in my garden, okay? So I can't say I was there. I just want to give you these two little vignettes, because each of them was interesting for me in terms of slightly knowing more about Joseph. I've learnt so much more today. One is simply that I remember going in a taxi with him and swerving around Lubyanka, and it was just about the time when I'd learnt to sort of say, that's Lubyanka. And he was trying to explain to me the cultural differences man and curator-wise between him and Victor Misiano. We saw these lovely collaborations they did together, but I think also there were, obviously, I know from being at the Pompidou Center, all these men are very competitive with each other. And so there was this little moment when he was trying to say, well, they weren't exactly like both tarred with the same brush. They were slightly different. They had slightly different agendas. And it made me perceive that there was a whole world out there I didn't know. What a very big world it was, because then my garden memory, because Joseph and Katy and their, I think, baby, toddler, and now very, very grown-up, scientifically qualified, wonderful son, used to occasionally come in the summer to things, and Katy would tell me how worried she was because Joseph was always on the phone. And he wouldn't get off the phone because he would never stop working, as you can imagine. But the point was, I knew that he was doing the most amazingly complex, subtle, political and financial and curatorial deals on the phone that were far beyond whatever situation the grapes on my vine or my little tea party was. We knew that this was a great man with great things to curate, and that's been shown by everybody today. So I just, I'm grateful but slightly embarrassed to be on this panel, because my role has been, I think, overestimated by people like Katy and Elena, as I never had the privilege of working with this very great curator. So thank you to everybody else on the panel. And over to you, perhaps, Marat.
Let's continue with Fyodor now. Is here?
Hello? I don't know if you can see me, hear me, whatsoever.
We can hear you very well. We are still waiting for you to appear on the screen, but just give us a second.
I don't think that's going to be the
now we can see you.
Perfect, fantastic. Hello everyone. It's been a while, I haven't seen some of you in a very long time, and great to see you and great to connect. I mean, what a wonderful reason for us to get together today. Joseph is such a huge figure for all of us, and I think he's still huge to many of us, even though physically he's not with us. I believe I have prepared a few. I just had to dive into my picture archive, which I've been working on for the last months. And surprisingly, I have found a lot of pictures. So maybe some of them we'll be able to see now, if my wonderful colleague Anna will be able to connect as well and put them on screen. I don't know if that's doable at all. Yes, fantastic. I have to confess that back in the year 2000s, I wasn't even thinking of becoming an artist. I'm an artist now. I work as a performance artist, and hello from Brazil, where I am right now. But in 2004, when I first met Joseph, I was running with my wonderful colleague who is also in London now, Alexandrina Marco, and who is friends with many of you. We used to run a communications company. And so basically, this is a picture from one of our communications reports. Everything that I will say now sounds extremely awkward now. I should say that we used to work with the Russian Ministry of Culture. And that was one of our major clients. And the Minister of Culture and all his staff were, wonderful people who we've been dealing in on a daily basis. And some of the projects that you will see now were the projects we're extremely proud until now. For example, you are now seeing a picture from Veru, or I Believe, which was an amazing and one of the groundbreaking exhibition projects in Moscow in the year 2006, if I'm correct. And you can see that Joseph here, famously wearing his beautiful winter hat, because that was happening in one of the wineries' sort of basements in Moscow at a temperature of 10 degrees or something, or maybe 7, next to beloved Maya Kobahidze, who was she was running a department of contemporary art in the Ministry of Culture, and she was an extremely intellectual, intelligent, and beautifully academically equipped woman, I should say. She was a very, very beautiful human being. Unfortunately, left us 10 years ago. So yeah, she was a particular admirer of Joseph's talents. So she invited Joseph. I think Joseph and Maya were in a particular creative sort of windmill which brought them to the creation of the Moscow Biennale. And also you can see Vasily Tsereteli and Oleg Kulik and Spider and some other beautiful beings at this table. So it was kind of a beautiful moment when we didn't understand that back then, but it was such an amazing rise of, you know, contemporary art thinking and contemporary art living and all of that in Moscow at the time. And Vinzavod, where this whole thing was happening, was such a great venue. I mean, I can't believe this all existed. Anyways, I wanted to say that where it all started. So my dad, my late father, Boris Pavlov, who was at the time the director of the Solyanka Gallery, which was a little state gallery in the central Moscow, called me saying, "Oh, I want to introduce you to a wonderful friend who wants to talk to you." And I was like, "Who is this wonderful friend?" He said, "Joseph Backstein." I was like, "Okay." And then Joseph called me the same hour. And Joseph was, "We need to meet urgently." And then we met, and the first thing he said, "You have to say ti to me." Ti, like in French, toi, and in Russian, ti, it's this kind of, you know, you show your intimacy, your friendship, and I mean, Joseph was much older, and I was surprised because I was very young. I was like in my probably mid to late 20s. And then we became friends very quickly. And then I called Sasha Markov, and we all got together and started thinking about the first Moscow Biennale, which was happening in 2005. And straight away, Joseph shocked us with his approach and with his thinking. And he said, "Why don't we think towards like some different types of venues? Why don't we think about approaching, you know, like some hardcore state institutions? Why don't we bring the Biennale into a complete different, you know, level of existence and make it, you know," that was the first Biennale. Biennale never existed in Russia. That was the whole brand new world to everyone. And I mean, I've never revisited those moments. And just now when Elena, you know, offered me, and thank you so much for having me here, first of all of you, and wonderful Elena Zaitseva, who we then met professionally for the first time again. And I think I started revisiting all these sweet memories and thought, oh my God, this is incredible how things were unbelievably different back then. Majorly thanks to Joseph, who was such a center of the entire movement. So the funny parts were that just before that, we were thinking about other projects, and I thought, oh my God, what a beautiful curator to our Norman Foster exhibition at the Pushkin Museum. And then I said, Joseph, why don't you become a curator to Norman's show, which we've been working at for the last year? And Joseph said, yeah, why not? And then I introduced Joseph to Norman. They loved each other straight away. There was like a straight away chemistry. And then the funny part that we had to convince Madame Antonova, the late director of the Pushkin Museum, who was at the time quite young. She was just, in her late 80s. She is on the left in this picture. And so I told Joseph, we need to convince Madame Antonova somehow. And then we had a strategy. So Joseph and I went to Irina Alexandrovna, and I told her, Madame Antonova, you know what? There's this amazing architect in London, Norman Foster, and he loves your museum. And he just made the British Museum and a new addition to the British Museum's architecture. And what a beautiful story that will be if you accept his show. And Joseph continued that and gave a few more funny things to this. And then Irina was like, okay, I've never heard of him, but yeah, why not? And then we told Norman, Norman, you know what? There is this wonderful lady in Moscow, Madame Antonova, who loves your work. And she wants you to be at her museum. And that's how we connected these two people, and they became close, and they loved each other. And then I remember clearly that Joseph and I and Sasha and a few other people who were involved organized this beautiful Norman's talk at Vinzavod. And that was the very first event at Vinzavod. I don't think anything has ever happened there before. So Roman and Sofia Trotsenko just purchased the old factory, the old winery. And Norman was the first sort of, and straight away such a superstar speaker, and we organized this talk there, and there were 3,000 people. That was dangerous, like outright dangerous, because this space wasn't designed to receive so many people. It was still like the old winery, which was just abandoned and nothing. Anyways, that was moments of beautiful happiness, which Joseph was a huge part of course. Then I remember when Joseph and I went to Madame Antonova, convincing her about something else, because Madame Antonova said that contemporary art will be shown at her museum over her dead body, and that was long away from that, because, well, thank God she lived a long life, and unfortunately she passed away in 2020 because of COVID. And then Joseph and I went to Madame Antonova and told her, Irina Alexandrovna, there is this wonderful, wonderful American artist who really wants to be shown at your museum, and this will be a part of the first Moscow Biennale. And she was like, I don't know what is Biennale, I don't know this artist. And then we showed her the books by Bill Viola, and she was surprised by how academic and how sort of old-fashioned in a good sense he is. And yeah, and there was this little screen. I remember this was like the one that you roll out and put on a tripod. And it was like somewhere under a stairway at the Pushkin Museum, not very well seen, but still we were very proud organizers that that the Pushkin Museum was part of the Moscow Biennale. I remember another episode related to Joseph, and that Joseph was really funny telling the story. He was supposed to convince Madame Antonova to take a part of Ilya Kabakov's exhibition and place it at the museum. And apparently, she wasn't quite crazy about this idea. She was like, why should I show this? And then Joseph brought her this book, which was Alternative History of Art. I don't think this was his initial idea, but that really works as a trick, as a beautiful trick. Because she received this book, and Joseph was there to visit her and to show the book, and the book was called Alternative History of Art. And it was, it had three names on the cover, so Spivak, Rosenthal, and Kabakov. And she started turning the pages of the book, and she was like, yeah, I mean, I've heard of this Kabakov, yeah, but like, Spivakov is not a great artist, but Rosenthal, oh my God, I've never heard of him. He's such a great artist. And of course, that was one of the two fictitious artists and a fictitious teacher of Ilya Kabakov. And that was funny. So she said, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not taking Spivak. Kabakov, forget about it, but I'm taking the show by Rosenthal. And then Joseph somehow wrapped it up in a sense that, voila, the show by Ilya Kabakov, a part of it, which was, I think, unwrapping the Garage Museum's presence in Moscow. That was one of the first projects that Roman Abramovich supported in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it took part at the Pushkin Museum. I mean, there are lots of stories and jokes and funny moments from this huge life that we had within this, I don't know, 3-4 years. And I'm so privileged that we had such enormous amount of common memories. But I have to say that Joseph,
Fyodor,
first of all,
just two more minutes.
Oh, no, I'm finishing right away.
Okay, thank you.
I think that Joseph was not just an extremely generous person that has been mentioned by previous speakers so many times, but he was also a visionary who I always mention as an example to many other people who start complaining about their age. So many people say, oh, I'm 45, or I'm 30, or I'm 25, or I'm 60, and I haven't yet done anything. And then I say, okay, look at Joseph Backstein. Joseph, who lived a very honest and very intense professional life as a curator, lived till he was 61 when he has founded the Moscow Biennale, and he became a superstar curator. He was a curator, he was a strong name, he was a big person, a big figure in contemporary art. But I think that the total rise of his fame happened in 2005 with the glory and beauty of the Moscow Biennale, which was definitely a project of his life. And that is a great hope to all of us who are in all types of age now thinking, oh my God, my life is over. Oh my God, I'm not there. Oh my God, I haven't done this and that. You know what? Let's all live until at least 61 and then we'll see. So I also want to say that, I don't know if this has been mentioned in the previous panels, but Joseph was a proud Jew. And I think it's quite a speculative and a wrong thing to say, oh, what a person, this or that, who's now dead would say about this or that situation in politics or in our life now. I mean, we don't live in the time of hope. We live in the time of depression and sadness. But I should say that Joseph, who was a proud Jew until the last minutes of his life, would have definitely been sad to see what's going on around us these days. And I mean, I have to mention that, unfortunately, you know, the 10th of October, the 7th of October last year, you know, seeing, you know, a good part of the art world celebrating, you know, the massacre of the 7th of October would definitely make him sad as much.
Further, 1 minute, please.
Yeah, as much as I'm sure he would be sad to hear that the Pushkin House, which is, you know, generously hosting us right now, has cancelled a talk by Dina Rubin, an Israeli Jewish writer who was supposed to be a guest of their program. So I have to mention this because I think that Joseph would be definitely on this side of things, you know, knowing what a tragic moments we're all living. And thank you so much for remembering Joseph and for being his friends and family, and I'm sure he will live a long, long life in our memories. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Marat.
Hello, everybody. I'm a producer, not art history, so usually I'm act, not speak. So sorry, my English not very good. And so when I come to London, it means that I give tribute to Joseph, to my friend, to his memory. Today, when Russia make aggression to Ukraine, we still remember our friends, and it does not cancel our private life, and it does not cancel our memory, but it is very important to be not only enthusiastic about what was done, but to understand how it look like from today. So we met with Joseph. Not met. We worked together first time in '92 when we make a project together with Kommer and Melamed. So what we should do with monumental propaganda. Kommer and Melamed this time was not only artist, but they was curator, and for this case it was international exhibition, a lot of famous artists, so it must be in very top international level. So for me it was something like test. So we worked together. I was energy, and Joseph was knowledge. And so from '92 it was all '90s this way. Yes, but today I want say not about our relations, but about this project, how it's look like from today life. So for example, this one of project, it was Kommer and Melamed project. It was idea that Lenin will left mausoleum, and it is very important to save masterpiece of architecture. And for this case, we must to create new way to use this. So, for example, like advertising place, the best advertising place, maybe like Times Square in New York. But today. Sorry, I will I will read. Yes. So today it looked like the main message was not to save masterpiece, but today that move Lenin from Red Square. Because, for example, in 2014, I met Gennady Burbulis. He was the closest advisor of Yeltsin, and he says that. All these bad things which happened with Russia, there is two reasons. First, Lenin still in mausoleum, and second, that it was no illustration of KGB people. So for this case, for example, if in this time, democratic politics, listen artist, maybe not happened what happened today. So it is very important to understand how it's when we in this time we are afraid that people will crush thousands of sculptures, this monumental propaganda, and we thought that it's happened. So communism is died, and Soviet totalitarian system is killed for all time. One moment, sorry. In general, the work of this couple, Guelman and Melamed, looks quite different today. For example, here is works of Stalin and Musa. The next. Yes. And all series of romantic social realism. So in 78, it seems that the figure of Stalin, as well as language of socialism realism, were no longer relevant and become legitimate prey for artists. Guelman and Melamed used them like they use the fur of dead bear to make a coat. But 40 years later, it turned out that the bear was alive, that Stalin and his ideas are relevant again. And all the irony of these works disappeared. Somewhere the questions arise. How safe was such a game with the monster? And maybe this is foresight of today's renaissance of totalitarianism in Russia. And it's also possible that the new Stalinists will like these works and use them in their propaganda without inverted commas. And when I look back and look at all projects of this couple, Guelman and Melamed, from today's time, I have the feeling that the timestamps, the date of creation of the project are mixed up. For example, the project's People's Choice. If you remember, it was the image was created by collective intelligence. So it was big exit poll, and people say what kind of art they want. I see it's like paintings created by artificial intelligence, but 25 years ago. For example, 4 years ago we make exhibition of Alec Melamed, Bad Jew. So it was comment to Andy Warhol project, so 10 Bad Jew. But today, what we the new wave of anti-Semitic in universities. So we see that this artist, they genuinely, maybe they don't know how they do it, but they see all what happened. And in fact, the last, yes, this is 1st of February. I open in Berlin exhibition of Vitaly Komar, Museum of Ruins. So 12 museums in ruins. And this project was born 20 years ago. It was first sketch, and now we create it with artificial intelligence. And the idea of artist was to understand whether ruins of modern architecture would be so beautiful as they are in case of classical architecture. But I'm already afraid that this project might not be a premonition of World War III, possibly atomic. So actually I won't use this conference to say all of my colleagues that Guelman and Melamed, they now separate, but they are still active, working, and care about them. Thank you very much.
Voilà.
Yeah, thank you. That escalated quickly to the Third World War. Okay. Can we put up the presentation, please? Because there's a wonderful link to the previous panel there. So this is the photograph from the opening of the 5th Moscow Biennial. And you remember Yara Bubnova telling us about the Minister of Culture, who she refused to name. And this Minister of Culture is right here in the center, touching his hair. His name is Vladimir Medinsky. And I believe that now he's in charge of development on the so-called new Russian Federation territories in Donbass. He was part of the peace talks, I think, in 2022, 2023 or something like that. And I distinctly remember what he said, because after this it wasn't during the press conference. He was decent enough, well, relative to other, other culture workers of the Russian state. He was decent enough to not share his opinions during the press conference. But after that, he publicly stated that contemporary art is a fraud. And he mentioned one of the works in Catherine de Zeger's biennial, saying that it's just a pile of bricks, how can this be art? And I remember that I, in my position as an art critic for a daily newspaper, I immediately wrote a column called The Minister and the Brick, which was very funny, very scandalous at the time. Anyway, yeah, it is also a document that shows, I think, very vividly the kind of aura and the kind of reputation that Joseph had among the younger people in Moscow at the time. I mean, Fyodor, who you've just heard, had the privilege of working with Joseph. I had the privilege of observing his multitudinous projects during that time. And I wasn't the only one, of course, but I was always amazed at how he brokered power during these early years of the Moscow Biennial. And I think about this as illustrations of this uncanny talent of brokering power. Let me just show you, well, one thing I have to tell about this photograph is that basically all the people here, apart from Joseph and Catherine, I think, are very much deserving of a BBC miniseries produced by Armando Iannucci. These are biographies, political biographies you wouldn't believe, guys. Anyway, it's not about them. Could we switch? I can switch, actually, yeah. So, the talent of Joseph, everybody was talking. It makes total sense this evening about how educated and how interesting Joseph was compared to maybe the stereotype of a post-Soviet cultural worker that existed at the time. But he also had this underground, invisible ability of negotiating certain powerful venues for the Moscow Biennial and for other projects that he was part of. And he started with the Lenin Museum, which is ironically, I should add to this, to the previous presenters, which is ironically still closed and was not opened after the renovation that started when the first Moscow Biennial closed. So this venue is symbolically positioned at the center of state power, is symbolically also positioned as a kind of iconoclastic gesture in relation to the high culture of old, the Soviet high culture, and obviously the Lenin Museum, apart from hosting several thousands of important documents related to the great politician's life, also hosted quite a bit of art and lots of paintings and lots of sculptures. The next venue, which was also mentioned by Joseph's dear friends and collaborators, can we switch to this one, was the Federation Tower. Now, I happen to know some part of the negotiations that went into securing this venue, because while the biennial itself was actually on the 2 floors of the tower that was still in construction as the people went in, there was also a 3rd floor, and on that 3rd floor there was an exhibition, a commercial exhibition by a nascent Moscow gallery that belonged to Marina Goncharenko, I think her name was, and she was either a wife or a relative of one of the developers of the whole Moscow city compound in the outskirts of Moscow. And so it was an interesting kind of agreement between Joseph and her, that she kind of persuades maybe her husband's firm to give this venue to the biennial in exchange of exhibiting work by artists, and they were very decent artists actually, work by artists that she wanted to represent going further on. And the 3rd stage of Joseph's fantastic talent was, of course, Jean-Aubert Martin's 3rd biennial, which was in large part underwritten by the Garage Museum and the Garage Museum owners Roman Abramovich and Daria Zhukova. After that, we can also kind of trace where the power went, because from that point on, well, the 4th biennial was in another, it was something analogous to Windsor, a form of factory that became a creative cluster. But from the 5th biennial onwards, all the venues were state-controlled and state-owned, and like prestigious state venues. And one can only imagine how much effort Joseph invested into securing those venues and into the diplomacy that was obviously part of this process. I can also note we had lots of conversations with Joseph over the years, most of them involving alcohol, and most of them not that very memorable. And I think my claim to closeness to the man is the fact that we were born on the same day, but several decades apart, of course. But I wanted also to note that Joseph, when he was thinking about the biennial to be, and of course you mentioned their disagreements with Victor Misiano, who was part of the project at the start, Joseph was faced with already a very crowded market of global biennials and global events. And basically he could go like 3 ways. He could make it West-centric in a way that all the NATO Anglo-Saxon biennials are. He could make it post-colonial in a way that the biennials and the events of that nature happen in former colonies, of course. They can also be West-centric, but that's a little bit, that West-centrism is underwritten by basically Western universities. But he chose to do the 3rd thing, which is this interesting, quiet and informal way of gathering friends together and kind of maybe hypnotizing the people that he's met during Perestroika and after, slightly after, into believing that Moscow is a viable destination for another act of their already illustrious career. And this informal aspect, I think, is underlying one of the most wonderful pieces of gossip I've ever heard about Joseph. He didn't actually disprove that to me, but he didn't tell me that it was true either. So when I was an art critic in mid-2000s and when the first biennial came up, somebody told me that Joseph charges $5,000 for you to leaf through his phone book. which is such a wonderful piece of gossip. And anyway, I'm very grateful to Pushkin House for putting this together, and I think that it's important to remember people who were much less public than the facing side of many of the events that we discuss, the curators, the artists. Thanks to those hidden engines, all those things kind of came together. Thank you.
Thank you, Vale. Our speakers have been extremely disciplined, so now we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Are there any volunteers? I have one brief question myself. Joseph has been active throughout a very complicated Russian history, and he was very successful throughout different eras and different ruptures, political ruptures. Can you think of how that affected his practice in your observations of him or working with him? Can you think of him reacting to the political changes happening around him? Because for me, as an outsider, he always seemed, to be very thorough. But you had experience of working with him, so I'm curious about your perspectives. Tim, can you put on Fyodor, please, back on the screen? Fyodor, can you unmute, please, yourself? Fyodor, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Would you like me to answer the question?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I think Joseph was, as Yara has brilliantly put it, he was a wonderful sort of policy keeper and one of the greatest cultural diplomats. Because what is cultural diplomacy if not an attempt to bridge things together, bring people from one camp to another? There were no camps at the time, but still we did belong to a slightly different realm than the people who would come and curate or participate, or still the Soviet, still the heritage of the Soviet times was stronger. And then I should say that for Joseph it was quite an important thing to think about the future of the Biennale. And unfortunately, this future wasn't brilliant without him. And we all know how disgracefully it's been destroyed and altogether failed after he stopped being a ruler. But I guess that the talent that he had in terms of navigating through the most complicated tasks and making friends with all the people that could support the Biennale and other projects he curated and organized, and also never being dominant in the sense of his own aesthetic and professional preferences. I should say that how would ever in the world you imagine of Yara, Daniel, Rosa, Hans Ulrich, and even Nicolas working together? I mean, this just sounds alone quite a metaphorical thing. And definitely Joseph was the one who mastered his diplomacy to an extent that he was able to put together people who would never, survive a minute in the same space. I'm not saying they were complicated people, or they are. They're brilliant, but they are all different minds, and it's hard to imagine these people, finding, a common ground. And because of Joseph, and thanks to him, they did work together brilliantly. And this was just the beginning. He was all the way, putting together things that would not exist closely without him. And I should say that this was a thing that definitely had its historical path, because the moment the Russian government and the FSB, the KGB, whatever, started wanting the contemporary art, which happened soon after 2010, let's put it this way, he was understanding that his role is over. you know, in terms of like how he could communicate with the government, how he could run the public funds, the state funds, et cetera, et cetera. So he started stepping back slowly but surely, and stepped back to an extent that he stopped talking to these people. And that was an amazing wisdom. And I think he totally felt. And then he's you know, I saw him several times in London when he was already he was already a little bit fragile, let's put it this way. And still, you know, last time I saw him was at the Tate. I had a meeting with, I think, Natasha Sidlina, who is a curator. And you know, Natasha was finishing her meeting with Joseph. And Joseph hugged me, and he was very pale, and he was definitely not in his one of his healthiest moments. But he looked at me and said a few things which I would never forget, which were very private and very intimate. And I realized that the era of Joseph Backstein is over in Russia, and he would never be able to do whatever he's been doing in his life, not just because of his health, but also because of history. So I think that is important to mention.
Thank you, Fyodor.
Sorry, I just want to say one thing about the Biennales, because the Biennales is not just, I mean, as magnificent as all the curated parts of the Biennale were, the Biennale under Joseph was a manifestation of activating all the other projects that took place in the city. And the huge number of galleries who put on special exhibitions, who opened at the same time, who came together in one big program as this big project for Moscow, was the really remarkable thing that he negotiated and got going. And it's you know, the international show was stunning always, but actually the visitors to the city internationally, what they took away with them was the hundreds of smaller shows in very many venues, and nobody saw the whole program. Joseph went from program to program to program. I mean, I was with him in the opening weeks, and he would visit like 5 shows a day to try and see these shows, understand what was going on. He'd approved all these exhibitions in the program. He had coordinators for the special program. The catalogue for the special program is as large as the catalogue for the main exhibition. This was a magnificent achievement, and when the Biennales finished, the seventh Biennale had no parallel program. They collapsed it. They refused to do a parallel program. That was their biggest error. They thought it was an international show. So we really have to acknowledge the way that the parallel program, the special projects, the special exhibitions that Joseph organized were very, very important to a Russian audience as a way of opening contemporary art to a Russian audience on a grand scale, not just one big show.
I want to add. I don't know, it's work. So Biennale was part of big project. Name of project is Russia is Europe. Russia is part of Europe. Russia is part of international life. Contemporary art was the main instrument to be for Russia to be international. And yes, we lose country today, but we win people. For example, now I live in Berlin, and I communicate. So thousands of young people who, through contemporary art, understand they become Russian Europeans. They don't. Maybe some of them still in Russia, and a lot of them leave. More than 1 million leave Russia. So these people future. So today is very bad moment to make expertise. What it mean? Maybe worst. But I believe that after some time, these people who learn contemporary arts through in 90s, they come back to Russia and they will grow new country, which will be part of Europe. So for this case, maybe we look like losers today, but we was right. So it was right direction. Russian culture is part of European culture. There are no this isolation is so it is not it is not way. Yes, they are winners. They stronger. That guns more strong than art. Okay, what to do? So we, I don't know how to English. Делай, что должно быть, что будет. Yes, you have to do what you have to do. We try to push country to the world. Maybe we was not very successful. Okay, but I hope that in big historical distance we will win. Thank you.
Thank you, Marat.
Yeah, Fedya, and this is Lena Sudakova, and I just feel that I have to address what you said about the event with Dina Rubina, because it's sort of strange, and I really don't want to turn this into a debate, but I want to say that that was all a very unfortunate misunderstanding, and if you looked at our program, you could see that we have never any intention, nor do we ever cancel people or postpone events who support Israel, and that is very evident if you look at the events on our website. Thank you very much.
We don't want, as you said, we don't want to turn it into a debate. But I have heard from dozens of people who were quite damaged by this news. And,
well, unfortunately, so I would not like to turn this into a debate. But actually, it was not us who cancelled Dina. It was unfortunately Dina who withdrew from the event. So if you have any further questions, we can continue this discussion in private. Thank you very much.
sure, okay, of course.
Thank you, and it was great to see you.
Just to say something different, I was desperately trying to be very quick. So I just wanted to say, for example, that the work I've had with Russian students has been incredibly enriching in all ways, but also non-Russian students I was able to take to Moscow. It's been very, very significant for them, including recently, and I'd just like to give you one example, that I understand that Jason Farago, who's now, the chief art critic of the New York Times, said to a friend of his how important, when political development started happening, that trip had been for him. And I think for many people, including people who haven't gone on with academic work or working with Moscow or anything, it was the springboard and the richness and the intensity of what so many people had at this moment is something that stays with them in their heart. And they saw, of course, the European Russia, which goes right back to Catherine the Great and Voltaire and your architecture and everything. We understand this big debate. But, our hearts are all going back to that period as a period of great and exceptional blossoming. And I think that it will stay with generations, and also new generations are learning about that period. And it's up to us to write the history of that period. And I would like again to say, because I was going so fast, Katy, I didn't involve you again in a tribute to everything you've done. Not only what Katy has done for Joseph's memory, but also taking feminism and feminist texts to Russia, which has been very, very important as part of her enterprise. And this group energy that's got everyone together, including all the international participants, has been really so rewarding for everyone. I just wanted to say that again. So thank you, everybody.